On April the 7th, 2018, we left the window-bashing birds and lizards of San Diego and headed to New York. Unfortunately, most of the New York Conways were ill with a bug, so we weren't able to see them. However, we did have the consolation of seeing a very recommended show, A Bronx Tale. Then we visited old Bedford haunts, including Eileen Kensing's in Mount Kisco, Sister Kathleen at the Boys Elementary School, where Margaret incidentally conducted an inspection of all the classes, and of course our old home, before heading along the Merritt Parkway to Providence, Rhode Island, where we caught the $120 Norwegian Airlines flight from Providence to a cloudy Cork direct. The following few weeks had us doing the usual Monkstown window gazing and Cork things. One new thing for us was a trip to Ireland's oldest city, Waterford, where we stayed in the beautiful Waterford Castle Hotel on an island in the River Barrow. In Waterford, we toured the well-preserved Viking city. We also saw the extraordinary craftsmanship on display at the Waterford Glass Factory. Finally, we retraced our way to Cork via Lismore, visiting the castle and the V-Gap on the way. But April 28th came quickly, and we headed to Dublin Airport and then Venice, where we spent a few days before embarking on our Mediterranean cruise. Of course, Venice is a dream. It shouldn't exist, and it was easy to be seduced by its beauty during our days before the ship arrived.
Estaria fresca, arecha da festa.
Buongiorno! But all of a sudden, oh my God, there was the Holland America Oosterdam, and it was time to check out our onboard accommodations, say goodbye to beautiful Venice, and head out for a flurry of stops over the next 12 days. The cruise would take us down the Adriatic, including 2 stops in Croatia and 1 in Albania, then to 3 Greek islands, then 2 stops in Malta, and finally Italy again, in Palermo, Naples and Rome, where we spent a few more days. Croatia is recovering from its recent war of independence. Split is an attractive, modest-sized town with a storied history spanning many empires. Its principal attraction is Diocletian's palace from 305 AD, where the emperor, who was from the Dalmatian area, retired. The palace occupies half of the old town. But before you knew it, we were in Dubrovnik. Over 60% of the old city was extensively damaged during a 7-month siege in 1991, but has been restored, and Dubrovnik is now one of the top tourist destinations in the Mediterranean. The city's walls are its most striking feature, visited by 1.2 million people in 2017. They run for 1.2 miles at between 13 and 20 feet thick. Of course, we had to sample the local fare, but then we were out of there and on our way to Albania. However, there really isn't much to say about Sarande, the Albanian town we visited. It's clearly poor, still suffering from decades of suppression, and hoping that tourism will spark some economic growth. So, after some modest Albanian shopping, we were off to our first Greek island. So we woke to find ourselves docked in Katakollin on the Peloponnese Peninsula. The peninsula contains the town of Olympia, about an hour's bus ride, the site of the original Greek Olympic Games. While a religious cult occupied the site from 1500 BC, the games themselves were established in 776 BC in honor of Zeus. The games were held every 4 years, and free-born men, not women, who represented their local city-states could participate. The games were part of a religious festival used to advance Hellenic culture throughout the world. They were finally suppressed and the site destroyed by the Emperor Theodosius in 393 to impose Christianity on the Greeks. 2 earthquakes in the 6th century completed the destruction. So we explored the town and did the same in Katakollin, and then we were off to Crete. We docked in Suda, a critical naval harbour for centuries from the days of the Venetian control of Crete, and notable for its importance during World War II. A visit to Chania, former capital of the island, gave a view of the impressive sea defences from Byzantine and Venetian times, and an insight into the sacrifices made by the Crete population under very brutal German occupation in World War II. But that was Crete, and now we were hitting the road, this time for Mykonos. Mykonos is a very beautiful island, and clearly worthy of more time. It's a small island with a population of about 10,000, heavily engaged in tourism. It's noted for its nightlife and for the LGBT activities there. One notable feature is the over 800 family churches throughout the island. Eventually we made it to the town, and gorgeous it was. But after a while it was time to catch the ferry, because we were heading to cover the 480 miles of sea voyage to Malta. Our visit to Valletta commenced with the promised impressive entrance to the magnificent harbour. Then we headed over to Birgo, the old fortified city on the south side, which had been headquarters of the Order of St. John, and whose defence led to the defeat of the Ottomans during the Great Siege of Malta in 1565. We toured Fort St. Angelo, saw the executioner's house, and visited the church of St. Lawrence. Then, after a little more wandering of the interesting streets of Burgo, we headed over to Valletta. In Valletta there was clearly more to do than we had time. It's obviously an active town with lots of history. So we absorbed what we could and headed back to our floating home, prepared for Gozo tomorrow. Emgar in Gozo was briefly visited the following day. But then Sicily beckoned. Following an 8 a.m. arrival, we headed out for a tour of Palermo. After an initial look around the city, we drove the 15 kilometers to the town of Monreale. Our purpose was to view one of the two cathedrals constructed within the city, arising from the 12th century political competition between William II of Sicily and the Bishop of Palermo, Walter Orfami. This cathedral is a national monument of Italy and one of Sicily's most important attractions. Probably the most notable feature is the large, over 6,000 square meters of glass mosaics, executed in Byzantine style between the 12th and 13th centuries. So back to Palermo we went to see the competitive cathedral. This one has quite a different construct, possibly relating to the Anglo-Norman background of the bishop and also the various Renaissance influences at play in its later development. One interesting feature is the inclusion of a meridian, which accurately projects a beam of light directed from one of the domes and which enabled the standardization of time throughout Italy. Another interesting feature was the availability of toilets behind many of the altars. We had another look around Palermo and then we were off, this time to Naples. After an 8 a.m. arrival, we quickly headed out of the industrial city of Naples, past Mount Vesuvius, and covered the 60 kilometers to Positano in about 90 minutes.
It's not necessary because the space available is really limited.
Then we explored the delightful town, engaged in a little limoncello purchasing, and all too soon we were heading to Sorrento.
Sorrento and Positano. Sorrento, on the right of it is the narrow street I was talking about, while the main road is this one, you see?
We poked around Sorrento and discovered an extraordinary craft shop called Gargiulo and Giannuzzi, which had a remarkable array of inlaid woodwork, pottery and linens on offer. We also explored the cathedral, dedicated to Saints Philip and James, built in the 11th century. One surprising aspect of the church was the quite exceptional crypt. However, keeping on the move, we had an exceptional lunch at the uniquely designed Hotel de Principi di Sorrento, complete with ocean views and beautiful gardens. But now we headed to Pompeii, the Roman city which was buried under 6 meters of volcanic ash during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The city was rediscovered in 1599 and in 1748, and its remarkable preservation is because of a lack of air and moisture. Finally, we saw the haunting bodies of some of the deceased, preserved in the exact moment of their death. As we departed on our last sea leg to Rome, we found ourselves parked alongside the Symphony of the Seas, the largest passenger ship in the world at 228,000 tons and 5,500 passengers. But in no time we were in Civitavecchia, the port of Rome. So we said goodbye to the Oosterdam, having travelled 1,984 miles with her, and embarked on the 70-kilometre drive to Rome. As we approached the city, we were constantly reminded of the tendency of Romans to deface their beautiful city at every opportunity. But we checked into our unique hotel, the Residenza Polo 6, which had been recommended by Pia, and which was literally a stone's throw from St. Peter's Square. It additionally had a bar for evening drinks overlooking the square. Of course, with that sort of proximity, we enjoyed the beauty of St. Peter's extensively. And also enjoyed the Roman nightlife, where we had a fun interaction with a couple from Liverpool who didn't want to talk about Ireland's recent defeat of England at rugby. We also assisted with a police action at the Vatican walls, for which they were extremely grateful. The following morning, having done our Swiss Guard inspection, we completed one of our principal objectives for visiting Rome, that is, a drink at Harry's Bar. Then we spent a day visiting old haunts and new Roman spots. At the time, my book club was reading the Confessions of St. Augustine, so a visit to his mother was very apt. Apart from some noted art, this church also contains the graves of two significant Irish earls, Hugh O'Neill and Rory O'Donnell, whose abortive rising against the English in 1603 was the last resistance of the native Celtic earls in Ireland. The churchyard also contains the Tempietto by Donato Bramante, considered a masterpiece of high Renaissance Italian architecture.
Wolf, which suffered
Yeah.
Romulus and Remus.
Yes.
To drive around the centre of Rome in these.
Right.
Ah, quindi ci si può entrare? Sì, qui si non posso. Fare qualche gioco.
But there was time for just one more look at St. Peter's. And we were leaving Rome and heading to Ireland. Of course, we resumed doing the normal Ireland things upon our return. But we did do a few exceptions. One thing we did was visit, for the first time, the church where Niall's parents married on the 29th of September 1937. Another thing we did was visit the notorious Crumlin Road Jail in Belfast, amongst whose inmates were Eamon de Valera, Bobby Sands, Ulster suffragettes, and multiple IRA and Unionist prisoners. Executions were carried out in public until 1961. In 1991, the Unionist part of the prison was hit by an IRA bomb. Another thing we did was visit the so-called Dark Hedges, which have been a repeat component of the TV series Game of Thrones. Another thing we did was visit Newgrange, probably Ireland's most famous Neolithic site. Newgrange is dated from 3200 BC, making it older than Stonehenge or the pyramids. The site itself contains 200,000 tons of rock and is the most famous of the trio of Neolithic sites in the area. Newgrange is one of several sites in Ireland where the winter solstice sun penetrates the inner chamber. And a final unusual thing we did in Ireland was to visit the very impressive Titanic exhibition
By March
in Belfast.
1912, Titanic was ready for her maiden voyage.
One small footnote from our forays into Belfast. We discovered an excellent boutique hotel, the House Hotel, in a happening area of Belfast. Then the weeks rolled by with the usual visits to Dermot's and Brian's, and the added benefit of an Eileen meringue. Later, a little droning around Cork, and the final panic eating of our last Irish food. But eventually the time came for Cork Airport and Norwegian Airlines once again. Before you knew it, we were heading over the bridge into Newport and staying at our favourite accommodation, the Cliffside Inn there. But now we met up with the New York Conways at Pelham and spent some time on their new and very nice boat. Then it was fun and ice cream with the boys, and another sail the next day after a Shane breakfast and an impressive display of stilting. But it was time to say goodbye to New York, and just time to fit in one final Banksy before returning to San Diego.